Okay, so we are recording. And just so the council knows, that the recordings, the audio of the recordings are being posted as the minutes of our meetings for public review, as the publicized documents for the minutes of the meeting. So we're using those so people can download and listen to those at their leisure. We'll go ahead and do roll call. Butch Huseby. Don't see him. Dan Olson, I believe he said he's not going to be here. JD Jacoby? No. I think he might have messaged me late that he couldn't either. Dustin Temple? Gordy Kahn? James Strait? Jason Smith? Jen Fowler?
I'm here.
Yay! Mike Bosman? Paul Suspaniak?
I'm here.
All right. Steve White?
Here.
Got him. Wes Err?
He is out fighting fires, I think.
I'm here right now with Shane Ralston, the safety officer for the Bitterroot National Forest. We're on a fire in California right now.
Wow.
All right. Welcome, Wes and Shane. Joe Froelich?
Hello, present.
Oh, there you are. I was going to say, Joe should be here. I just talked to him yesterday.
Yeah.
And myself. Okay. And Shane Ralston. All right. So I have to go review on whether or not we have quite a quorum, but I don't know that we're making any official decisions today. So that probably doesn't matter. We'll treat it as a good work group meeting if not. So jumping into the basic standing agenda, which I did tweak slightly for the public participation. For the procurement process piece, we'll review the draft recommendation. A couple of items to report for overall, and opening that up to the council teams. I posted some more documents to the team site for our review. What we have, I put under the general channel and the files tab. I've added the Montana Legislative Audit Report, called the Montana UAS Audit Report from the legislature, as we have been discussing, referencing that in regards to what they found, and then the executive order instructed us to do. So I put that in there for reference. And in that report, it references the National Institute of Justice considerations and recommendations for implementing a UAS program. So I found that document and uploaded that as well for anyone's reviewing as well, if that is useful to us. The audit report did point to the Institute of Justice document for some cost-benefit discussion. So I threw that up there in case that was useful. However, and I did put a note in there, the Institute of Justice document discusses a cost-benefit template tool decision tool, something like that. And they reference a URL for that. I went to that URL and could not find that tool any longer posted there. So there's screenshots in that document about the tool, but I think the tool itself is not available to us, just as a note, if you go looking. I also would like to give a little shout out to Jen and the others of you that worked on the centralized coordination documents. I saw those one back there from August, and also one she posted yesterday that I was looking at. That is really great work. I think you guys have made a huge headway on that. Really appreciate the effort folks did on that. So I just wanted to kind of give a little shout out and a thanks for the effort that was started on that in those areas, and we may get to discuss those later today. So thank you, Jen, and I think Wes and Stevie may have been in on that. I'm not sure who else. So. All right, anything else for the general council that anybody wants to report on before we get into the procurement discussion piece? All right, hearing nothing. I hope everyone's doing well, enjoying their summer. Apparently, with over half the people here gone, or at least half of them gone, they're out either enjoying summer or had other duties. I know several of them had other duties they had to do. I think James said that he had to go do a UAS flight. I thought that was a pretty interesting excuse to miss the UAS council to go do a UAS flight.
I think that's a great idea, UAS flight. And also then from a risk perspective, connect that to a system and download, update, and those type of things. Just comments.
Right. So actually, let's do that real quick here, Joe. This is your first time that you've been able to join the council. You were a late addition by the governor's office when they reviewed the council members and realized they did not have someone from DOA on that. So why don't you introduce yourself to the rest of the council?
Yes. So hello, everyone. My name is Joe Froelich. I am my old job title used to be Enterprise Security Manager, and it is current and updated to the Policy and Risk Management. And I'm within the Department of Administration, SITSD, and for the services. So I'm excited to be on this council. My team helps assess systems and really focused on SITSD for the general support systems, the Exchange systems, Active Directory, different things, IT systems. So this to us kind of falls in that realm, but I can expand on that later. I'm happy to be here and participate, and excited to learn more here on the drafts. I've gone through some of the drafts, the procurement policy draft and the council objectives. So I think I'm not fully up to speed yet since I just got access yesterday, but excited to participate and hopefully provide input and be useful council member.
All right, thanks, Joe, and welcome. Since there's only a few of us here, real quick, Steve, you want to introduce yourself to Joe just so he knows who you are, and we'll let Paul and Jen do the same.
Yeah, my name's Steve White. I'm in Bozeman, and I'm a cinematographer, aerial cinematographer, that I do a lot of stuff for a lot of the TV station stuff for CBS across the state, and I've been flying UAS for 25 some years, and so it's great to be on this, and there's a lot of stuff that we've been covering. So welcome to you to drop in. Except that I notice in the background you got a grizzly thing, so that's
yes.
I'll try not to look too closely at that sign.
I work with a lot of bobcats,
Yeah.
so unfortunately, but good people all. So.
Well, that's the bummer with Zoom. So we get to see which affiliation you are.
There you go.
That's
So Steve is one of our public citizen members. The other is Wes Wes, why don't you go ahead?
Let me get started here. So I'm the director of Unmanned Aircraft Systems for Bridger Aerospace. We currently are, I think, the only remaining Type 1 UAS for national resource for mapping wildfires is really our kind of our big duty that we accomplish right now. And then just to Ralston, he's over here making some off the tee. We're on a fire right now, and he's also our UAS manager, so he's our agency rep for this fire activity today.
Hey, welcome to the party today, Wes, and got your guys out in the field today testing some new radar stuff. So you're missing some stuff going on down here.
Yeah, I'm bummed. We'll be back soon. I see you got a bunch of lipos back there, so you be careful with those, Steve.
Yeah, well, they said they got plenty to charged up, so we're in good shape.
Awesome.
All right, thanks, Wes, and Shane, welcome. Joe, if you look in our team site, I think James Strait posted it. There's a neat article on West and what Bridger Aerospace is doing in one of their drones. It's a little a YouTube video. Go take a look at that. It's pretty cool to see what they're doing with this stuff these days.
I will do that.
Paul?
Good morning. I'm Paul Sapaniak. I'm the investigations manager for the Department of Corrections. So we handle all law enforcement response for DOC statewide and handle all criminal investigations that are at felony level.
And Jen.
Hi, Joe. I'm the director of autonomous aerial systems at the University of Montana. So I have that side, but I also have a part-time, my other half of my job. I work for Montana State University as assistant director for the Montana Space Grant Consortium. So I've been working.
Where does your allegiance lie there? That's kind of crazy.
I know. I try to do
personality.
the split thing as much as possible. I've actually been at UM for 22 years, so
Very
it
cool.
probably tips a little bit towards the Grizzlies, but I do enjoy all my colleagues at MSU.
Yeah.
They were nothing like people described to me from here when I first got over there.
That's awesome.
So welcome to the committee.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think she tried to merging the maroon with the blue and got some really odd color purple, and so it's really,
Then it looks like Carroll College.
Yeah.
it's in the middle. There you go. Safe neutral ground.
There you go.
All right. So I want to turn to the procurement process draft review. Frankly, I did not see anyone else making any edits to this. So anybody have any other comments on it, or am I to conclude that folks did look at it and did not find a lot of benefit in adding anything to it, that we should move that on to some legal folks to add some input and see if my intention is to see if the governor's office finds that we're going in the right direction with that. Any comments or thoughts on that one? And I'm going to try to bring that up here for a second for us. U.S. procurement policy draft. Here we go. I'll share the screen if I can.
I have one comment, and I'm sorry that I'm late to this, and it's really, I think it's very well done, and I think for the most part I don't have. There's just a couple things that maybe I'd like to add to it, but it was really from a risk management, and my part would be data security, the privacy of the data that's information, if there's a connection to the state of Montana or anything else. So it's really under the Section 3 requirements. I think it's well written. If such a device is intended to connect to the state of Montana in order to receive data collected by the device, and ITPR should be filed by the Department of Administration. That is good, and I think that's going to kick off a risk management process for the agency. And where they document the risks for the data itself and how that's being managed, and the privacy, if there is privacy. And I'm assuming that there's going to be, but it just depends on what the data is collecting. But so I might have a little comment here to add in addition to that, but I don't have it today. But those were just my notes, and I kind of wrote some stuff there. And the next paragraph there, data collected is owned by the state of Montana. Yes, that is true. Now that's whoever owns that device, right? So if it's the state, University of Montana State University or Montana, they're the ones that are owning it as it's flying around, and so that data is theirs, or the state of Montana. So that should be accurate. Because who's responsible for it? It'd be the agency. And then the next references are good as well. So I might have one little sentence that I might add to that, Cray, in this week. What I'll do is try, because I know that you're trying to move this forward.
Can I ask a question to Joe?
Yes.
That first sentence and in the brackets it says accurate. The thing that we discussed in the last meetings or whatever it was relates. We spent a lot of time talking about ownership, and so the understanding, of course, is if the state of Montana is doing it, they likely own the data, and because there's only one owner, but if they're doing something, and I'm looking more at if it's an image thing rather than, collecting some type of other data, but basically that is something that if the contract, I think, has some flexibility where, as an example, everything I do, I'm paid to do, and by people, and I've done stuff for PBS, but I own it, and that's part of the contract. And so I can understand if the state of Montana owns the equipment and their employees are flying, but now all of a sudden there could be something a bit different that would be agreed upon if you had a third party out there doing the data collection, and especially if it's images, that it could be that there's expectation that third party contractor could have expectation to own it. So I don't know how that figures into all this.
Yeah, on top of
I
that,
assume that would be in the
Joe,
contract. Oh, sorry.
yeah, and the Department of Commerce also had something along those lines when they're contracting for some of the documentaries or other movie cinematic things that are going on in Montana.
Right.
Sometimes those organizations also retain rights to that material. So I kind of tweak that language unless otherwise outlined in an executed contract.
Yeah.
And I thought that's something we'll toss up to legal folks to wordsmith a little bit.
Because sometimes the ownership will be transferred to the say the agency contracting, but the price to do the work usually gets bigger, because now all of a sudden you're owning the end product and you get a better price if the contractor ends up owning it. And it is classic with Department of Commerce where they could be shooting images across the state to promote Montana, and the contractor may have expectation that they own those images and that they would sign a license agreement allowing the state to use those images any way they wish, except that the state is not able to resell them. That's usually how it works.
Right.
Yeah, sure. And it could also be federal ownership,
Yeah.
depending on
right.
collecting it, so.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
we'll get that worded. Joe, there was something I kind of retweaked this also. I said the department should reference, and then I put in brackets, the DOAS ITSD data classification policy. I think you guys, and we talked about this, I think yesterday, that I think you guys have a policy on that, but I don't know where that is. So if you could help point us to, for where we should point people for guidance in handling sensitive data sets on that.
Yes.
Reference, that would probably be helpful there.
Yes, I do know where that's at. Yeah, and I had a hand in writing it years ago, but I was part of the committee for that, so I do know where that's at.
So that would
and
be
I guess
helpful.
going back to the question of the who owns the data, and you're right, that sentence does need to be reworded, because it's the data collected by the device is owned by the state of Montana. It depends on who owns the device, right? So if it's the third party, they're owning the device, it's their data at that time. It'd be depending on the contract, right? So if it's the
Right.
so if the state of Montana bought it, so it's all in that contract there.
Yeah.
And it would need to be clarified. But yeah, I think that is not necessarily true, for sure. And I think Don Harrison and others will help correct that. But that's a great point. Yeah, who owns the device, and then who's paying for it, and and that's all in the contract, what you can distribute that to, and can they resell it. And so, yeah.
And it could be that we don't really need to define that. We could just say data
Right.
owned by the state of Montana is subject to blah, blah, blah. And therefore, if a contract had it that we didn't own it, then it would be different.
Actually, if you just worded it that the ownership of the data is as outlined in the contract, in the executed contract,
Yeah.
that's really what it is. As
Yeah,
long as it isn't set in stone in this document that it has to end up being owned by the state, it's just that, you know, that the contract really is going to be the flexible instrument.
Yeah. Right.
Right. I think this policy is for state government, right? And that would include local government. That would include universities, correct?
Jen, I was just going to ask you on that. I think I saw in the audit something referencing that the university system owns yours data, which is a little bit different. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, and some of this depends. When we're under grants, for example, working under NASA, NASA owns our data, even though we technically own the instrument. We purchased it with grant money from another agency, a federal agency. That federal agency has first dibs on the data. It's typically my understanding of that.
Yeah.
So it really does, it kind of depends on the mission, the contract, again, of who owns the data.
Right. Right. I think so. That second line there, as such, it's a subject to MCA security of the responsibility of security of the data is responsibility of the department director. That is true if it's owned by the agency. And so so that sentence is really for the state of Montana and its agencies, not necessarily for. So I think that that last paragraph there just need a little work, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Well, let's clean that up and
And I can help with that a little bit to give some ideas, but yep. Contract. Yeah.
I guess I do have a question here. As this relates to all the agencies. This is a specific UAS procurement policy, and I guess I'm wondering how that butts up against we already have procurement policies in place for pretty much anything. So that's, this comes back a little bit here to this $1,000 limit too, where, you know, if it's under $5,000, currently we don't do a cost benefit analysis on much of our equipment or supplies. Well, so, and even at a federal level, there's a definition based on a dollar amount. And I guess that's a question for the legal team is how does this sync with what's already in place? And can we pull something, a device aside and set up a different policy as opposed to even just a camera that goes on a drone?
yeah, I think you're spot on, and that's where under A for general requirement, I think what we're just trying to generally do is say, hey, this falls under regular state procurement rules, and here's how and why and what pieces apply to what. One of the big questions that had come up is, does an ITPR be required for procuring a device with SITSD as an IT procurement request? And so we're trying to break it down, saying, look, this is general equipment that falls under regular state procurement laws, except if a piece plugs into the state network, then IT policies and things apply. To try to get some clarification to that. The only reason really why we're even, in a sense, addressing this, I think, Jen, is for section B, because it was called out that there should be a cost and benefit analysis for UAS systems. And so really the policy is about the cost and benefit analysis as much as anything as being a requirement prior to procurement. Does that make sense, or does that help, or any thoughts on that?
No, I guess I even wonder along those lines, can we call out a UAS for cost benefit if we don't call out a cell phone or
I know, right?
a camera? That's my curiosity a bit on that.
I don't disagree, 100% any significant purchase, and why $1,000? Originally they wanted it 500, and I talked them up to 1,000. No, it was going to be even less. It's like $50. And I'm like, come on, you can't buy a battery for that, you know. But we could recommend as a council saying, you know, this really should just be $5,000 to match state procurement law. There's no good justification for picking a different number, and that would probably be a defensible action to say that, and maybe even legal would back us up saying, yeah, you know what, that's an arbitrary number, and that's just because that's what the governor's office picked. The cost benefit analysis, yes, should be done for any significant purchase in state government. However, I'm not aware that there's any statute or policy that requires a cost benefit analysis before purchasing those things. In this case, because the legislative auditors said, we found that none of the state agencies really had documented any measurement, expense, cost, risk, liability on this thing, that should be done here in the state of Montana. And the governor's office agreed. And so that was one of the things they wanted us to outline is that as part of a requirement piece for UAS systems. Now, I think it should be for other major acquisitions, but that's beyond the scope of the council. We could always raise that point saying, hey, it seems a little odd that we're going to require this for this when the rest of DOA doesn't require it. State procurement should require that perhaps for any significant purchase in state government, but they may have reasons for not wanting to overregulate that for agencies either, because as we talked before, for some agencies a $20,000 purchase may not be a significant expense, and for others it may be a full-blown, you know, business case scenario depending on that agency's budget and what they're procuring. So
I guess I would be in favor of pushing back a little bit, because even this just comes back to I can build a small satellite for $5,000 or under $5,000, and I wouldn't have to do a cost benefit analysis. It's just a platform. And I would claim the UAS is a similar thing. A tethered aerostat can be up to $10,000, which would kick it into another category. But let's say I got one for under $5,000, I wouldn't, again, have to do a cost benefit, and it literally does the same thing a UAS does. It's just a different platform.
you know, maybe what we should be thinking is not a cost benefit analysis for each procurement of a particular device, but a recommendation for cost benefit analysis for a UAS systems program in a particular department. Maybe that's really more what they're thinking. As I was reading the audit some this morning, maybe that's really the road we should be going down. Is if you're going to set up a program, do a cost benefit, because they're getting into the costs of insurance and the risks and mitigation of liabilities as well as the gains and expenses, because several of the agencies said, look, you know, here's what it costs to fly a helicopter, and we can fly one of these for about, you know, I think it was like a tenth of the cost. And so, you know, there's that one's pretty obvious on that, but so maybe it's for a program we should be recommending it instead of a particular procurement.
I think that would be a good idea. That would make more sense than the bigger picture.
Yeah, because then what if an agency had the cost benefit analysis for their program, they really only need to do that once and have that on record, and not every time they're going to add more devices to it. Now, they may want to do an internal one for more devices depending on the cost of that device. But, you know, to create red tape on a few $1,000s drone when you don't on, you know, a trailer for your vehicles for hauling your equipment, you know, is that getting a little bit too in the weeds on one particular thing just because of the audit?
Yeah,
No,
I agree. I agree with that. Each agency could have their own unmanned aerial systems cost benefit analysis. Yeah, there's no sense in every time we buy a laptop, we need to have that cost benefit analysis.
So I'm going to make a note in here while we're talking, if I can do this. Steve or Paul, any, or Wes, any other comments along those
That
lines?
sounds good to me.
This is Paul. I agree. It sounds good to me too.
And yeah, I have no dog in that fight, so it seems like you guys have that figured out.
All right, I think I found how to put a note on that thing as a reminder. And I'll throw for the,
note for that data collection owned. And then I think it is worth looking at ITPR with the Department of Administration, because I mean, yes, if you're University of Montana or Montana State University, you have your own procurement through MUS, and I don't think that they're going to be submitting, or I'm not aware of University of Montana or Montana State University submitting IT, requests now that way. So that would be only for agencies within the state of Montana under the, executive. I don't think universities would be part of that, nor would law enforcement and in cities and counties to
Right.
purchase and so that needs to be thought of a little bit of how that procurement process, but there could be some guidelines of, and I think it goes back to that protection of the data and the privacy of that data. And no matter who owns it, that it's going to be, if it's going to be used by the state of Montana, that's a little focus on that, and I can help with that.
okay. So I got notes on those two. Appreciate that, Joe. And I can take a look at some at trying to tweak that towards more of a program. And I'd love input on what you were talking about, Jen, too. So. The additional well, anything else on those two sections first before we move on? Okay, on the additional requirements, I only had the two that I came up with so far. And I don't know if we had anything else we needed to add versus as part of the executive order for this piece. Again, as I think I told you, Joe, I don't want to see us get too far in the weeds on the data ownership in this one, because that's actually, I think, going to be covered under the UAS plan, which is going to be a different one that we can turn to here in a few minutes. But just referencing people to the correct place on that, so we're not ignoring it here. All right, so I guess just another request to consider if there's anything else we need to put in as a requirement. We'll work on wordsmithing those two sections up here above, and then hopefully we'll start getting some legal input on this to see if there's anything else we need to consider to refine this and see if we can't. And we can also talk about that $1,000 thing and get feedback on that. And then see if we can get something closer to actual draft to release. Okay, anything else on this document? All right, so let's turn to the next piece if we can on the centralization oversight and the documents that were posted there on that. Let me see if I can get over here and reshare those. All right, hopefully you're seeing that. Jen, do you want to dive into one of these or talk about them at all or introduce them to the rest of us on what you guys have been working on here and putting together?
Sure. Do you want to click on the centralization policy? That one, yeah, that's the latest. So based on all the great work you did pulling the other policy together, Trey, we just took that template
That looked
and
familiar.
added in, yeah,
Yeah.
just added in everything that,
We'll let you go first, Cray, and then we
yeah.
just jump in.
we just blatantly copied everything you gave
Yeah.
us. So thank you. We appreciate that.
But, it was kind of funny because I started reading. I'm like, wow, she did a really good job on writing, or you guys did, and that's good language. Then I went back and started looking at mine, like, hey, wait a minute, it's the same thing.
We just stole it.
That was Jen's idea. I had nothing to do with that.
Yeah, it was. I just took it and ran because I was like, oh, these look like they apply. So, literally, it just followed your template, and then I took our original recommendations and I put them together, and then we just discussed. There isn't really much that's changed here from the first version, where we feel like FAA compliance. You got to follow the FAA regulations. And I think the two biggest changes here, training is still the same of what we had discussed earlier as well. But we actually call out, if you go back up to A here, and it's kind of middle of the paragraph, sort of towards the end, we have all this information, oversight by MDT.
Mm-hmm.
And centralized within MDT. We just put in a division. They're not here to say they don't want it, so
There it goes. Yeah.
stuck that in. But this seemed to be where that's what we were feeling, that's as a group, that we kept discussing MDT's role, and so we put them in. I don't know if this is where they want to be, but we assigned a compliance officer to keep track of a number of these things, as far as the pilot licenses and training and making sure pilots are staying current. And the same thing here with training. If you scroll on down, the training's everything that we had talked about before. Transfer as ownership is the same thing we've talked about, and there's already documentation in place to guide people as far as how to transfer ownership. And I put in an example. There is a question there under the training about if you have a contractor, insurance requirements for those contractors. And I found the city of Missoula had something that they put out, but I didn't find something for state in general. If there's guidance that could be followed, that if an agency wants to contract with a pilot and their aircraft, what insurance requirements?
Yeah, and I think there are, and Joe, you probably are familiar with this because I believe DOA, I know in some of our IT contracts, they have to have sometimes up to $2 million in insurance. But I don't know if that's just standard contract language or if that's actually a rule of some type. Joe, do you know?
I do not know the answer to that. That would be state procurement, and I could probably get someone to help us answer that question.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
I know that the MSU has some requirements, and then they actually go one step further and they want to be additionally insured. And then the Forest Service is the same way. In fact, I think both of them review the insurance to see what if they agree with all of that you're being covered on. So, but that's just liability. It has nothing to do with the aircraft.
Yeah, it'd be good to find out if we have something in place. I know, and Steve, I don't know how it applies to you or Wes, to your team, but we've had other software contractors come back and push back saying, hey, the cost for me to get $2 million of insurance is gonna, meet or exceed the cost of your contract. Can we talk about this? And so I don't know what that looks like for you guys and how that applies. And liability perhaps is what it should be limited to or something, but.
Well, I've done my, Jen and I talked about this, and I'm certainly have had my frustrations, at least locally, with MSU and with and sort of with the Forest Service, because they're for UASs, for contractors I'm talking about. There are companies out there that I used to use that would simply insure you for the event, so you could get insurance for 1 hour if you want, and you can have an additional insured attached to that. And it really would be nice to get some acceptance to that, but it wasn't acceptable to MSU. So they wanted to see they want to see an annual insurance policy is what they wanted. So
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of suspected that could be a note of frustration, especially for smaller UAS operator organizations.
oh, absolutely. I mean, if you're doing a short-term contract with MSU for 3 weeks or 1 day, and then you have to go and get an annual insurance policy to cover it and pay $1,000 for the policy so that you can do a 2-day project.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think our insurance policy is very unique, difficult to renew, and I mean it's in the tens of thousands of dollars annually for premium. So for smaller work, you definitely want to avoid that level of necessity for that. I mean,
Right.
maybe the state picks up a short-term insurance policy for the event itself. I don't know.
Yeah, and I was kind of guessing that you guys probably had a pretty good one there. But for the state, and just for the council's information, for the state side, our vehicular liability policies are written such that that a UAS device or a UAV is just another device, another vehicle, another moving piece that they have included in their policy. It just becomes another digit in the number of vehicles the state owns. So that's where our insurance comes under, is that comprehensive policy with risk management and tort. But sometimes if you're contracting with someone else and the state's insurance isn't necessarily going to cover that, and they're going to want to make sure that there's coverage for any incidents that happen on that.
Well, I know how it works with the workers' comp stuff, and also too, if you rent the facilities at any of the universities, that you have to have some insurance coverage. And the reason is that, as I understood it, was it lessens the cost for the insurance coverage for the university or for the government entity. So they're saying, well, we'll make the users that we're contracting with get their insurance and make us additionally as an additional insured, and thereby we're reducing our expenditures and passing that basically on to the contractor. It just that I wish there wasn't as much that scrutiny, I guess, on the insurance policy, because to me it was, as long as you're covered with the liability, that was important. But there was they wanted, I've been asked to have the insurance policy language changed, which that's nearly impossible. That's boilerplate stuff, that's coming out of the insurance company. So that was my only problem. So I if there could be something here that could address that and loosen it up a little bit, I think that would be good. I'm just talking contractors, if it's the state doing stuff with their equipment, with their employees, it's a totally different deal. So.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And as I think about it, for a little clarification, we've been pretty much talking about liability of flying the device.
Right.
The state IT contract that I was thinking of with a $2 million liability, that was actually for a breach of sensitive data. And so let's say that we hired someone to go fly some sensitive infrastructure, a hydroelectric dam or something, and they released that to
Right.
public consumption. They just potentially put the state at risk, or let's say
Sure.
there was, identified taxpayer information or something. They want to make sure that data handler had some liability coverage for that, because it costs millions to start notifying people and to provide coverage for them and such. Not that this type of information tends to have to require financial coverage, but you know, that's where we start getting into a new realm of what type of data we're securing.
I think Brett Dahl from Risk Tort and Defense can help us answer this question, at least from a state agency perspective, and the universities.
Yeah, you know, it's the sense, you know, for us to try to figure out what is sensitive information when it comes to imagery or other type of remote sensing data. You know, I don't know that we've actually really tried to define that. And I'm a little bit loath to try to get too much in the weeds of, okay, how many feet of resolution do you have to identify a person type of thing, um, of whether or not it becomes PII. Jen, if
You
you
know,
guys already kind of gone down this road, please, you know.
one thing that probably should be looked at, I don't think we've talked about with the sensitivity of data, is maybe DOJ, you know, with the Highway Patrol out there using UASs to capture evidence at an accident or whatever. I don't know if that's sensitive stuff. I knew that before they passed the law, they needed a search warrant to gather it. But I don't know if the DOJ is sensitive to that, and that's kind of maybe a parallel path to discuss. But it could be that they have a different attitude towards what sensitive data is to them, and that's how they're using it pretty exclusively at the Highway Patrol, and maybe even, you know, crime scenes and things like that. So I don't know. I have no idea, but you might just put that on the notepad, create it. Maybe that's something that should be asked of DOJ.
Yeah, Steve, this is Paul, and I would say is that anything that's going to be of evidence would be criminal justice information and is confidential.
Yeah.
So it's gonna put it into a whole new category with confidential criminal justice information, especially evidence that's collected.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
How did we, where were we getting into this discussion?
Go back up to B. So right there, right above C at the end of B.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, right, for insurance.
Yep.
Yeah. No, Steve, that's a great point and idea. I was actually hoping Justice would be on the call, but you'd be here for a couple other questions as well. I'll just put that in here.
And that would be the same for us at DOC if we were using it for crime scenes here. Again, as for part of our criminal cases, it would become confidential criminal justice.
Right.
Yeah, because you know we have to remember it's not the device that's collecting it; it's the data. It's still remotely sensed, whether it's a body cam or whether it's a drone. It's imagery, and so how do we handle that? And you know, ideally, I think we should stay general enough with those things because the technology is going to change. It's the mechanism by which we acquire it's going to change, but the data itself is what we're really actually talking about. So,
and you know, there's possibility. There's even Montana statute that has some sort of mention of protection of that information. So I don't know.
There
yeah,
is not.
there is.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joe.
There is definitely some MCA that talks about sensitive information, but it doesn't talk about particular. I don't know about the photo or the you know, that the graphical type, and so that would be to look into that a little bit. But I have, you know, I think it does. CGIS data, you have federal requirements to protect it.
Yeah.
PII is a little different, and so if it's PII, we're flying over somebody's house. That would be personally identifiable information because you could tie that person back to that house, back to that address, back to, you know, so then it's PII. So I think you're dealing with PII versus, you know, versus CGIS, and it's all about the agency collecting it. And if there is a crime, as DNRC is flying over a house and there's a death, that could become CGIS data. And so, yeah, it's protected a little differently, but.
I was trying to find and pull up. I found that MCA earlier. I thought I had it right here on the screen. I think it is 217. It's either 217.512 or 217.534, I think, that talks about the department's responsibility for securing sensitive data. But it doesn't really define, personally identifiable data and stuff like that. But what, in this sense becomes that is probably not defined in MCA. I wanted to also, let's see if I can.
Well, it just talks about adequate security, and so then we go down that path of what is adequate security, and applying the right type of security to that data, and that's all about the contract again, and how that system connects back to whatever system at the university or state agency.
So again, this is Paul again. So again, if it's case related to a criminal case, if you look at 44.303 MCA, it talks about dissemination of confidential criminal justice information. And again, I'm not an attorney, but I would argue that anything that's collected in a criminal case, photos, any kind of data, reports, all become confidential criminal justice information and would fall under that statute.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I would imagine most of what DOJ collects is a potential to be that, and so they would hold it as such. Okay, we're going to run out of time to keep going through the document. The other thing I just wanted to highlight up, because I had it pulled up from the audit. So you guys right now have kind of named Department of Transportation. We've talked about that. Jen, you made a mention the other day of something that that I was thinking about the other night was should we be looking at Department of Justice as a potential centralization source for this as well? And so in the audit, when they looked into this, just going to highlight Illinois had the Criminal Justice Information Authority was the one that was a centralized authority on that. So they are using their Department of Justice. Nevada had Department of Public Safety. In North Carolina, it was Department of Transportation, and Ohio and Utah, it was Department of Transportation. So 3 of the states was Department of Transportation, but there are some other states using something like Justice. And as I thought about it, I was like, if really what the centralization is about compliance with FAA rules and regulations, pilot licensing, and hours in, well, is that really that much different than something like a driver's license? Because it's a license to operate a vehicle. And so maybe Department of Justice, maybe, because it's not a transportation mechanism. And so maybe that's something we should consider too. And so I throw that out there, and I kind of wanted to get Butch's take on initial reaction if we started talking that way, what his thoughts were, but he's not here. So
There's at the end of the document, I threw in some to be considered and maybe throw DOJ on that too.
Of your document?
Yeah, just right at the end of that second page.
Yeah, he's gonna do.
Because as we were discussing it, some more questions came up. So we just led questions still to be considered.
Yeah.
And also, Crayon, I just want to highlight that what we did on that document was that we didn't get into the weeds as far as what the FAA rules are as far as being authorized to fly and all of that business. But what we did do was we added in something the FAA doesn't have a requirement of, and that is that they need to know how to fly. And then there's attachments that Jen put on there that that they are, you can see under B there, that it says that they possess a current FAA remote, Part 107 probably, and they've passed a practical flight review. Now that isn't something that's required by FAA, but that would be required for the purposes of this exercise. So, and so then there's some example documents that are attached as appendixes. So we didn't really reiterate what all of the different details of the FAA certification is, because with the FAA changes that, then you'd have to go back and change this document too. So we just say, you know, if you're legal with FAA, okay, fine, good. Then you're current, so you've complied with the FAA. Now, in addition, you need to be able to understand some other things that assure us that, and that goes back to the risk side, is that we've actually, in theory, should be reducing the risk to the agency by showing that they know how to fly, you know, because the FAA, you can get your Part 107 and then 2 months later go buy your aircraft. So.
Yeah. No, I think it's perfect on that, taking that line of thinking, and that's, I think it's great. And what you guys put together here, I thought was really well done, because it is. There's no reason we need to restate anything the FAA does. Otherwise, you just have to manage the document.
Yeah, it becomes a real mess then.
Just anything the state of Montana should do over and above or in addition to, and I think you guys have started identifying what that might be. That's not excessive, but is reasonable.
And if anything, you could include the FAA documents that are referenced as appendixes, or just have them in the 3-ring binder with this document, and so that they don't have to go digging for it. I mean, it's all of the Part 107 stuff would be there that they could look at, you know, and just, so if that ever changes, just change out the Part 107 component of the document.
Well, the digital links help there too, as long as
it's get you there
live. Any other thoughts on that thought about chatting that with Department of Justice?
No, I see that it's in there. What that sentence, you put that in there under one. So I think that was good.
Mm-hmm.
For the meeting, I added that.
I guess the only other thing that would be nice to see is if folks get a chance to read Section D, because that was another area where it's a little bit different than what we had talked about, but essentially putting a committee together that would meet regularly.
Yeah, and I think we'll have to push this to a future meeting here soon, but I think that is going to tie in. And so what I did is I added this little line of a Part 2 section on citizen interaction and data security. Because you go back to the outline and the executive order, the Montana UAS plan has 2 basic parts. The Part 1 is a centralized oversight organization, which you guys have done a pretty good job of addressing here. And then Part 2 is citizen interaction, is what I call that, and including that as data security and handling that privacy of information that we actually got into a bunch of discussion here today and such that we need to probably add, I think, to this document. And I'd rather not see us throw out half a dozen different documents and policies that people need to follow. So if we can keep it down to maybe the 2, that would probably be good for everybody. But and so that committee or council or board or whatever that ends up becoming, I think would also have a piece in that citizen interaction piece. And so I like the track you're going down there. I think we'll probably be threading that together a little bit more. Because some stuff I've been picking up is that if you want, and I think I made a note here, I did over on the side, that that if you want to be successful standing up a UAS program in a government entity, you really need to be zeroing in on transparency. The public needs to see what you're doing, where you're doing it, why you're doing it, if it's available, what the data is you're collecting, so that they have full knowledge and insight and participation in how this is operating. That will alleviate a lot of the concerns that could otherwise do that.
And also, Craig, on this Part D, that the thing we talked about was that the one real big benefit is that as this thing becomes more refined over the future years, that there are going to be tweaks and changes and additions to the policy. And now we say, well, who's going to suggest those? Well, the idea is that this UAS committee would just, of representatives, similar to what we've got right now, would then engage in that exercise annually, and then could make some suggestions. And they would be the entity that could look at it, instead of saying, well, you know, we got this document now, which agency, I mean, DNRC, should they do it? Should the DOJ do it? Well, if you have this group that meets annually or semi-annually, I think it's a good exercise for them to do, and I think it would work.
Yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree. I think so. And I like the MOU suggestions too. That's something that's already in practice, and that makes good
Right.
sense. That may be a good way of implementing that. So, all right, we're getting over on the time here, so I want to make sure we finish our required agenda. Any other business or comments from the member councils? Okay, hearing none. Any public comment? Do we have any public members on here? Shane, I guess you'd be comments you'd like to make, or comments or questions?
No, this is Shane. I just appreciate you guys letting me on. I'm always kind of curious. I was detailed to the Washington office and to the Forest Service and wrote our UAS policy and our ops plan. So I'm always kind of curious on what other folks are doing, and I'd like to definitely work with you guys or be involved if you guys have any questions. I think it'd be important as a cooperator. Thank you.
Yeah, no, Shane, that's great. And please, by all means, if you guys have already hashed through some of this and have some stuff written down that could be of use to us, would you please, get that to Wes or me, and so that we can kind of look at that and see if we can't borrow and steal from yours as well, and make sure we're aligned so that we don't go down a different track than you guys. We work so
Yep.
much with the federal government in our agency that I would hate to have something that conflicts with what you guys do. We've had that problem in the past, and we'd like to avoid that. So,
Yeah, you bet. I emailed Jennifer a copy of our operations plan, and I did align that with the Department of Interior, so it would cover all the federal agencies that are using the aircraft for the most part. But yeah, any questions you guys have, hit me up. I'll try to find the answer. Currently, this is a collateral duty as UAS. Hopefully, I'll have an opportunity at a job as we fill them as a regional UAS person. I forget what the title is exactly. Coordinator. If I get an opportunity at that, I would be a lot more in my lane, but I just have a little bit of knowledge, and I'm willing to help out however. Thank you.
all right. Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Shane. And I think there's a number of us on the council that are doing this as another duty as assigned, myself included. So,
I'll put that document that Shane shared up in Teams, in the files.
okay, excellent. Thank you. All right, any other comments? All right, Shane, Wes, you guys stay safe out there. I appreciate the discussion today. Good discussion, good progress on a lot of this. Please take a look at these documents, make the tweaks needed if we could try to get that done so that we can keep this stuff moving forward. And otherwise, I'll see everyone hopefully next week.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Yep. See
Thanks,
you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.